Hello everyone, I am here today to talk to you about the brain and the science behind it. As I'm sure you are aware, the brain is the most important component of our body. It is the driving force behind all bodily functions, as well as our information processing and problem solving. In this video, I am going to go over the 5 components that the brain is made up of, and how each of those components contributes to those bodily functions and problem solving. The 5 key components of the brain are the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, the cerebellum, and the temporal lobe. Note as we go through the slides how damage to any of these functions can cause problems for us in that capacity. The first lobe that we are going to talk about is the frontal lobe. This lobe is in charge of motor control, problem solving, and speech production. As you can see, this is very important, as this is where a lot of our creative thought comes from in problem solving, and how do we deal with our everyday situations. It's also very important with speech production. As you can see, damage to that could cause severe problems with speech and being able to communicate with our fellow men. The second lobe is the parietal lobe. This involves touch perception, body orientation, and sensory discrimination. I think this is also very important, especially with sensory discrimination, as this tells us what is okay to touch and what is not okay to touch. I like to think of the classic example of touching a hot stove. If you don't have that sensory discrimination and can't tell that it's hot, you could burn your finger and not even know it. But when we do touch that stove and it burns us and we go, ow, that's that sensory discrimination kicking in and telling us, do not touch. The third lobe is the occipital lobe. This is the lobe in charge of sight and visual perception and determination. I really think it is interesting with the visual reception and determination and how seeing things can really determine our emotions and what we are feeling at that time. I like to think of something gross that you might see and how it might provide a volatile reaction. That's your brain determining that I do not like to look at that. The next one is the cerebellum. This is balance and coordination. As any components of the brain that I've talked about, they're all important, but this is extremely important as well, as it allows us to walk, it allows us to run. It's in charge of basically everything we do with exercise and being able to move functionally. If this is damaged, it can lead to a lot of issues with being able to keep yourself straight, and it's just very important. The last lobe that we're going to talk to you is probably the most important, and that is the temporal lobe. This involves auditory processing, language comprehension, and memory and information retrieval. You can probably see why I think this is the most important, especially looking at that memory and information retrieval. This is probably what people think of most when they say, like, you have a big brain. You're able to process a lot of information and keep it up there with you. I think memory is extremely important. It kind of defines who we are. This is what we think about. This is what we remember. This is kind of what makes up most of our lives and what we've seen. Yeah. So for my model, I decided to make a model of the brain using gummy bears, separating each lobe by colors. The top orange one is the frontal lobe, the top red is the parietal lobe, the back yellow is the occipital lobe, the bottom red is the cerebellum, and the green is the temporal lobe. I think this model could be very easily done in class. It was kind of fun to make, just looking up a picture of the brain and separating them into the lobes. And I think you can learn a lot throughout this. Even before this video, I didn't have a ton of knowledge of each function of the brain, and just building the gummy bear model and separating these lobes and understanding the function behind each lobe, and then thinking about if there's damage to any of these lobes, how much of a problem that would cause in a normal person's everyday life. I think it brings a lot of attention to the brain and how problematic brain damage can be. Thank you for watching. That is the end of my video. Hope you enjoyed.